Okay, so I'm going to start by assembling the top cover or the air horn. So what it means, I'm going to install the power piston and its spring using its little retaining screw and washer, the accelerator pump, and the needle valve and its seat in the proper holes. So we'll do it in the order that the book does it. They put the power valve piston in first. Make sure that everything's clean and the spring is proper. You stick it in there. Make sure it slides very easily. And you take its little washer, retaining washer, and screw. And you put them in the hole. And you screw them down with the Phillips head screw. You make sure the little arm is off to the side. Make sure you get it in right. That the power piston is actually all the way in before you put the screw in, or it doesn't work. Alright, there it is. Works nice, smoothly, everything's fine. Next will be the needle valve, fuel inlet needle valve and its seat, all in a nice clean pack so we don't lose anything. It has a little fiber gasket that goes over the end. This one doesn't have the little screen that goes over it. And here's the actual needle valve with its little rubber seat, the spring that goes inside there, and then the plunger on top. And we'll see if we can use the screen off this other one. So I like screens because they tend to keep things a little cleaner. So I'm going to take my old screen and put it on the new needle valve. Okay, there's the new one. There's the old one. I'll get my ginormous screwdriver. There it is. Nice and tight. Okay. And then this assembly just fits in there, and we'll have to be careful not to tip it over now that it's just sitting in there by gravity. The next will be to install the float and to adjust it. If we're lucky, maybe it won't need adjustment. So here's its hinge pin. There's the float. It only goes one way. Alright, like that. Now we have to measure its droop in this direction, and then when we turn it off again. So when it sits like this, the factory service manual says that it needs about 7.5 millimeters of clearance between the bottom of the top cover and the bottom of the float. So the way to measure that is I take my feeler gauge pack. I guess that what would be about 7 millimeters, 7.5 millimeters. I check with my caliper, and I pick enough of these till I get about 7.5 millimeters. Okay, there's 7.4, so that's pretty good. And then I use that to go to check, and it's pretty darn good. Okay, maybe it's a half of a millimeter off. And so to change that and raise it a little bit, then you have to bend this center tab here to adjust it, which I'm going to do with these. So you bend this tab down to raise it a little bit, and try it again. Okay, and then I did a little too much. So it's trial and error. Let me get exactly 7.5. So I bent it a little too much, so I take it out again, and I bend it back. And I try it again. So it's trial and error, you know, you'll get it after a few times. Not quite enough. So this determines the level of the fuel in the carburetor bowl, so it's actually a very critical adjustment to get this right. And then I did it too much. So we're getting close. So we're bend it back and forth until we get it exactly what it says in the manual, 7.5 millimeters. Oh, that's looking good. Ooh, that's real close, but not enough. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, that's it. Took about 5 times, but we got it adjusted. Okay, we've got one more adjustment of the float. You see, we're going to adjust the lowered position of the float, so you lift up the float and check the clearance between the needle valve, plunger, and the float tip using a special service tool, and the clearance is 1.1 millimeter. So you need this little narrow feeler gauge. Well, it turns out that the regular match is 1 millimeter, so that's pretty close. So I'm going to use this as my special service tool. You lift up the float gently and you check the clearance between the float and the plunger, and I've got more than a millimeter, so it's probably 1.1, good enough for government work. Okay.